is advanced coding processes. Oh, somebody says I could hear you. We can't hear you. Okay, thanks for the feedback. So if anybody can hear me fine, we'll just start with where I ended here. So in essence, we're dealing with insurance carriers, and the thing that you have to keep in the back of your mind is that they do have the budget to pay for things, but they want to bully you out of getting those things paid for in an effort to reduce what they pay. Their obligation is to their shareholders as well as to people that own the companies, and that's why you see a lot of this bullying, is because the more they don't pay you, well, the less they pay you, the more they make for their shareholders. I want to share with you a quick story that will build at least the sense of appreciation behind how we can overcome bullies, especially on the insurance side. Now, you may recall the stories of David and Goliath, the Spartan armies led by King Leonidas at the Battle of Thermopylae, or my personal favorite, the Battle of Baltimore at Fort McHenry. On September 13, 1814, British warships delivered a downpour of rockets and mortar shells onto Fort McHenry in Baltimore Harbor. This relentless pounding of the American fort lasted for 25 hours. Weeks prior to this attack, the British burned the Capitol, the Treasury, and the President's house. Needless to say, the Americans, their hopes were crushed. Any hope of victory was completely shattered through this experience. Francis Scott Key, a 35-year-old American lawyer, witnessed the barrage of Fort McHenry from just 8 miles away. It seemed as though Mother Earth had opened her mouth and was vomiting shot and shell in a sheet of fire and brimstone, Key wrote. Given the magnitude of the attack, Key was certain of a landslide British victory. But in the dawn's early light, Key saw the American flag, not the Union Jack, waving bravely over the fort. The Americans had won. During the attack of Fort McHenry, Key penned a poem called, we now call the Star-Spangled Banner. Many historians believe that Key's poem restored the confidence in those who were defending the land of the free and the home of the brave, despite the scale of attack by British forces. Now, for those of you that either have served in the military or have family members serving, my heart goes out to you, and I just want to thank you for your service for this great country and all the freedoms that we get to enjoy. I like this story simply because when you talk about battling dental insurance carriers, when you talk about battling any bully, it's all the same. They're very intimidating, sometimes insurmountable. It seems like hard to overcome situations with them. But the reality is that we can overcome any bully, no matter who they are. So I put together this article. I write for Dental Economics as well. In this particular presentation, I put together an article called Battling Dental Insurance, Dental Economics. It's the February 2017 edition. If you're interested in that, you can Google it, or I can email you a link to that. And it covers a lot of what we're going to talk about today in terms of how to get an insurance carrier to pay for the type of dentistry that you perform. So we're going to go through this, and then after this, we're going to talk about some specific things that they deny and how you can appeal those successfully. The very first part about defending yourself from insurance abuse is making sure that the dentistry being performed is at its all-time best. Too often I hear in the industry, and I do personally witness and see, that many times a buildup that is submitted to an insurance carrier doesn't really qualify as a buildup. And oftentimes, you see dental practices submitting 2-surface composite fillings as 4-surface composite fillings because it pays out higher and doesn't require any pre-auths or doesn't require much paperwork. For the most part, the insurance company pays for it. So you have to be very careful, making sure that you're doing things ethically and honestly and in the best interest of the patient. I like to call it, do your best clinical dentistry. Start off with doing your best clinical dentistry, not the best policy dentistry, in an effort to find out ways to be creative on getting paid more. You'll get in trouble if you do that. Part 2 is the CDT codes. Did that buildup really qualify as a buildup according to CDT? Now, you may or may not know this, but insurance carriers pay money to lease the CDT definitions from the ADA. And in exchange, they do promise that they follow those CDT definitions. The CDT is written as a guideline in terms of how doctors need to submit their clinical procedures in the form of a CDT code or a billable code to both the patient or the insurance carrier. So CDT is a standard, and just make sure that you understand it in an effort to back up and justify any of the things that you're appealing when you do submit an appeal letter to an insurance carrier. The third part is finding a pattern of abuse. So Tessina, who works for us and also works for another doctor part-time, she started to notice that certain insurance carriers, United Concordia, United Healthcare, Delta Dental, were all engaging in denying anything in the perio category first time around. She would submit a perio claim, whether it be scaling and root planing or osseous surgery, gingival flap surgery, and the insurance carriers will just deny it. So she noticed that after the fourth appeal, insurance carriers would start to pay up. So she called me and we sat down and we decided to hire an attorney to review this, and we did. The attorney looked at everything and said, yes, there is a pattern of abuse going on here. There is a pattern of denials, unnecessary denials. But unfortunately, here in the state of Utah, where I'm located and where the dental practice is located as well, the insurance, the lawyer basically said that our state, we don't have the ability to sue an insurance carrier directly. And he said, in fact, many states in the United States have that same law where a doctor cannot sue an insurance carrier. So your only course of action to fight a claim is for you to work with the insurance commissioner in your state and or the insurance carrier. So we decided to call the insurance commissioner. And the first response from the insurance commissioner was, no, we're not going to take a look at this simply because you're the only person that has ever complained about this in the last 5 years. And we just found that really odd. Like, are you freaking kidding me? There are tons and tons of Facebook pages that you can follow that people are just complaining about how insurance carriers love to abuse dental practices and deny claims and not cover things. So what we decided to do is we decided to go to those Facebook pages and get feedback. Hey, are any of you getting denials from these insurance carriers on these codes the first time you submit them to insurance? Sure enough, we got well over 200 people that said, absolutely, those scumbags, they're just all trying to find ways to fight back, but didn't know how. So we took that information over to the insurance commissioner, and the insurance commissioner basically said, you know what? We can't represent all 200 plus offices. We're government, don't like to work, whatever. So they said, we'll just take on your case alone. And that's what they did, is they looked at Tessina's case, and Tessina sent everything. We had to get permission from the patients to release that information to the insurance commissioner. So we did all of that. We submitted a ton of EOBs and denied claims, just the whole process, the timeline, charts, everything. About 2 months later, the insurance commissioner came back and said, hey, good news. We hired a dentist in Utah to review this. And an independent dentist that had absolutely no gain of reviewing and either siding with you or siding with the insurance carrier. In the end, we just wanted to know the truth. And the truth that we found is that you did your best dentistry, you followed CDT, and the insurance carrier was engaging in a delay tactic to force you to appeal, which we know that many offices don't appeal after the second denial. They just drop it, And we know we hear that's an issue even on the medical side. So what we've done is we've contacted these insurance carriers and we've sent them a court order cease and desist, stating that if they do deny another legitimate claim that has no impropriety or defect, that we're going to put your license to sell dental plans at risk in the state of Utah and perform a full audit, which means that if we do find you doing this to other offices, then we could revoke your license to sell dental plans in our state. In addition to that, they gave these insurance carriers a $2,500 fine per incident. So this is like a traffic violation. You speed, you go 15 miles per hour over the speed limit. That's what the insurance commissioner said. These guys were going 300 miles per hour over the speed limit. They were just really pushing the edge here of ethics and violating state and federal law. So we submitted a fine to them per incident. So, and then on top of that, this has been over 2.5 years since this has occurred. Tessina has said that the only denials that she ever sees from these companies are legitimate things where she may have forgotten to send a narrative or x-rays weren't submitted or whatever it is that's needed to check a box on the insurance side and make sure that they've received everything from you to pay the claim. But other than that, nothing has really been denied at the level that it's been denied before. So big win. All the buildups were being paid for. All the scaling root planning was being paid for the first time. and the insurance carriers essentially stopped this whole thing of denying. So this was a big win that we found. And one of the things that we found is we were discouraged several times throughout this process. And we decided, look, we're not going to let the insurance carriers win. So we were relentless, number 4 there on your screen. And then we let the insurance carrier advocate. We followed everything that they asked us to do. And in the end, we won. We won in a big way. So here in Utah, we've started this movement to get a lot of offices to do the same. Well, we have over 400 offices that have reported that the insurance commissioner has been very, very helpful. So I recommend giving this a try. You know, if you're stuck in loss and there's nothing else that you can do to help the patient get a covered service paid for, get a hold of the insurance commissioner and find ways to get them to help you. So I mentioned that buildups were one area where we received a lot of denials. So one of the things that we've learned about the buildups is that if it's required for crown retention, and if you read the CDT and your buildup definitely does meet the criteria, and the insurance carrier has buildups as a covered benefit, which most of them do, there's no reason why they shouldn't be paying this for this code if it's covered and if it fits the criteria. So the other thing is we see is in the perio coding, perio maintenance, the scaling root planing, and then the new one, 4346. I'm going to talk about 4910 for a second. So the question I get a lot is, well, when we submit 4910, insurance companies come back and say, well, the patient should be in 1110 and this and that. And that's simply because many offices, they probably fail to recognize that you can't just go from 1110 to 4910 without doing scaling, root planing, gingival flap, or osseous surgery. The policy changes are different. The policies are different for scaling, root planing. Some insurance carriers want at least 2 quads of scaling, root planing before they'll activate 4910 for the patient, or gingival flap or osseous surgery in an effort to activate that 4910. So the other thing about 4910 is that I often get the question a lot where many dental practices after 2 years of 4910, at the request of the patient says, I'm healthy, I floss, I brush, and I do this and that at home, I eat healthy, and I want to go back just to regular cleaning, of course, because they're probably tired of paying that 20% extra copay. So we have practices that switch them back to 1110. 2 years later, patient is right back into 4910, requiring a full 4 quads of scaling, root planing. And then the insurance carrier pushes back. Oh, I thought the patient was healthy. The insurance carriers will find any excuse to push back. So the question becomes, can you alternate 4910 and 1110? Even if you're doing it with, a treatment in conjunction with a periodontist or within your own office, can you alternate? And the answer to that question that I've received from a number of experts is no. If a patient is in 4910, especially if it's an adult patient, now there are some rare occasions where you'll have a teenager or somebody younger than 25 where it's a rare situation where 4910 would be appropriate, but their gums aren't too terribly torn up to where they would be indefinitely in 4910. Fully recognize that does happen rarely. But for most adult patients, once they're in 4910, you have to keep them in 4910. Otherwise, you're going to have a very difficult time reactivating 1110 if it's the same insurance carrier involved where you're billing the same insurance carrier from 1110 back to 4910. So 4342. So this is another denied code that we see quite a bit from the insurance carriers, particularly United Concordia. You show X-rays, you show cone beam images, whatever it is, 6 millimeter pockets, bleeding like crazy, and vertical bone loss. Insurance company United Concordia looks at it and says, well, we just don't agree with what you did. There's just not enough evidence. It's complete BS. So what we found is that it is illegal for an insurance carrier to engage in the process of diagnosing treatment on their end. If they say anything that challenges the doctor's diagnosis, saying, well, we just don't agree with what you did, that is 100% illegal in every state. In fact, we had a situation where an insurance carrier submitted a letter to the patient and told the patient that the doctor overdiagnosed her and gave her a treatment plan that was completely unnecessary. Patient was so upset, saying, you guys just ripped me off. we took that and said, you know what, this can't be right. How can that doctor know? I mean, when that patient smiles, you know something's wrong with her teeth because it's very, very obvious that she doesn't take care of it. But how can an insurance carrier say that you did the wrong thing without even physically examining the patient? So we knew that that was probably wrong, and we filed a complaint with the insurance commissioner. And the insurance commissioner said, wow, you guys need to report this to the attorney general because this is completely inappropriate for somebody that's not even licensed in the state of Utah to engage in diagnosing dentistry in any way, especially if they're representing an insurance company. So long story short, that consultant on the insurance side got in trouble in a big, big way. Short of it being a malpractice suit, I think it ended up, going all the way up to the National Practitioner Data Bank. This person was a dentist licensed in the state of Pennsylvania, and it was a full-on complaint that this was inappropriate. This is essentially engaging in diagnosing dentistry without physically examining, without having a license to do so in our state. So we won that case as well, and again found that United Concordia just stopped adjudicating. They stopped appealing all of the claims that we were submitting to them because we were doing it the right way. The other new code that I want to talk about here a bit is 4346. Now, this is starting to get covered more and more by insurance carriers. Sometimes it's covered at 100%. Sometimes it's covered only at 80%. But in essence, the 46, many refer to this as a quote-unquote gingivitis code. But basically, this is a patient that's between perio maintenance and a prophy. There is some bleeding, or in other words, this is the typical bloody prophy patient. And when this code came out, many officers were concerned, the patients aren't going to want to pay that extra 20%. I'm just going to get a lot of pushback from the patient. Well, that hasn't really been the case. I think many practices, they do the bloody prophy, and then they just write it off. They don't even mention to the patient, or sometimes they do say, hey, there is some bleeding. It's not a big issue. We'll just go ahead and do the deep cleans for free. Now, you got to be careful with that, simply because this code was created to protect you. There have been situations where practices would do scaling on patients and only report it as a prophy. 10 years later, the patient loses a tooth because they stopped seeing a dentist for 5 years. And then when they saw the new dentist said, well, let me get your records from the old dentist. And in the charts of the old dentist, there was no mention of any perio disease or any gum disease of any type. So the patient was notified, hey, your last dentist didn't really cover any of this with you. And the patient, of course, said, no, this is my first time. So long story short, clinically, they found out that this patient lost a tooth as a result of not even getting the right treatment or maybe receiving the right treatment, but not even being warned or receiving at least any indication that they have a condition that they need to focus on. So they never had that opportunity. According to the lawsuit said they never had an opportunity to engage in any clinical focus on at-home personal hygiene. So anyway, the doctor ends up getting sued, settling for over $200,000 in this one case, all because perio was not mentioned, and the codes that were used were inappropriate. They were using 1110, not even noting anything that the patient had in terms of perio. So 4346 was created to prevent a lot of these perio lawsuits that you see day in and day out. Well, I see day in and day out, simply because many practices do prophies and some scaling without any mention or charting or any note of any gum disease of any type. So pay attention to this code because it is getting paid more and more and more. Now, let's say a patient comes in and says, you are completely taking advantage of me. I don't have gum disease. I floss every day. In all reality, you were flossing like chunks of steak out of the patient's gum line. But patients, what they say is often reality and what's there, and what they do is just a huge disconnect. But sometimes you see patients refusing, saying, I'm not going to get this scaling replaning done. Just give me a basic prophy. So we're seeing many offices have patients sign an SRP waiver or a perio waiver, and then you do the prophy. Well, that's not appropriate either. Many practices have been sued simply because if you tell the patient they have gum disease, they don't believe you, and you have them sign a consent form saying that they have gum disease, and you still do the prophy, that is considered documented supervised neglect. Now there's evidence that the patient was informed that they had gum disease and a condition, but you still did prophy. So the recommendation that we receive from ADA members and malpractice insurance carriers, dentists who work there, they say if a patient just insists on you getting a prophy, send them to the periodontist, or do not do the prophy at all, because at some point it may come back and bite you in the butt. So be very, very careful about that. Okay, we're going to move on to something here a little bit more controversial before I'm going to try to get you out of here in the next 10, 15 minutes. So we talked about the denials. It's not just the perio, the gum, the buildups. There are a bunch of other things that we see by way of denial. In the end, if the treatment was legitimate and the code was right and you submitted everything that you needed to submit and it gets denied, appeal it once. And if it gets denied, bring the insurance commissioner in to help you get that claim paid. And it's more than just bringing the insurance commissioner in. It's more so establishing the fact that when you fight back and a bully knows that you're going to fight back and punch really hard, guess what they're going to stop doing? They're going to stop bullying you. And that's the whole goal of that, is to prevent those denials in the future by just really pushing back as hard as you can. So this next part of coding, I want to talk about some controversial areas of coding in 2018. Now, the theory of Darwinism, which this picture depicts, is that oftentimes species and individuals are resistant to change. The theory of Darwinism, often referred to as the survival of the fittest, is a lot more than survival of the fittest. Darwinism is about the species that learns to adapt to change will most likely survive. And a good example of that is the flu virus. The antidotes the antivirals they bring for the flu are sometimes ineffective. Did you get the flu shot last year and still got the flu? Well, I did 2 years ago. I got the flu shot and I still got the blooming thing, and that's just Darwinism. It's a species that's trying to evolve to change in an effort to survive. When you look at medicine, really big. Sorry, folks, if you can hear me, for some reason, things kind of stopped. Can everybody hear me? If you can hear me, I don't know what happened there, but if you can hear me, go ahead and chime in there. Yes, we can hear. Okay, thank you. So I apologize about that, folks. So thank you again for saying that you can hear me. Lost you for a second. We can hear you now. Okay, so I'm going to back up for a second here. So essentially, high tech is it's a law that was introduced in 2009. When we talk about Darwinism, we're talking about the survival of the fittest, or adapting to change in an effort to survive. And when we're dealing with insurance carriers, you have absolutely no choice but to adapt to change. You have to. And oftentimes I see these really big dental plans, treatment plans that come through. They may be all on 4 cases or all on 6 or 10 crowns, 5 crowns, you name it, where insurance carrier would only cover a small portion of that treatment, and then the rest of it is paid for by the patient out of pocket. Well, I met with one of my attorneys that works for the law firm that we have on retainer. I met with her, and she actually represents an acting firm. And this firm basically has all of their actors go to this particular dental office to get, quote unquote, smile ready. And sometimes they're slapping on veneers in a couple of days. They're doing this amazing cosmetic dentistry. And sometimes this work is more than $30,000 to $40,000 worth of cosmetic treatment. And the firm says, look, we don't have time to get the insurance carrier to approve any of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to sign an insurance waiver, which is something that's afforded by the HITECH Act on your screen, that allows patients to get quick treatment or treatment for whatever reason without the use of insurance. Now, there are many situations where you want to use insurance, but in some situations where you're receiving a $30,000 to $40,000 treatment plan, does $1,500 really make a dent in that payment out of pocket? Of course not. So essentially what the HITECH Act is here for is it allows us as those that work in dental practices an opportunity to use insurance, max it out, but not be abused by those things that are not covered, or those things that are not covered after the annual max. So, the other thing about the HITECH Act that I like is that you don't, when the patient signs an insurance waiver, you do not have to bill the codes listed on that insurance waiver to insurance. And I'm going to show you exactly how you do this here in just a minute. But the other thing is I don't know where everybody's at. I don't know what state you're from. But in our state here in Utah, we have a Utah non-covered service law, which means that if it's a procedure that has absolutely zero benefits by the dental plan, then we can charge our standard office fee. We don't have to follow the PPO fee if we're in an in-network provider. So how do you use this HITECH Act? I like to start off with the crowns. Like in the crown world, we have PFMs, we have 2740, which are porcelain all ceramics. We have zirconia, which is, you have no choice to bill zirconia but as a 2740. And then EMAX, you have to bill that as 2740 as well. Or if you have your own milling machine and you mill CEREC or zirconia, you have to bill it as 2740. But oftentimes, you might be doing an EMAX case that is really expensive. And here's where it gets exciting, is that you don't have to eat the cost of the lab fees for anything in the quote-unquote added value arena. Now, added value is a key word that I use because in the insurance contracts between the patient and, the employer and the insurance company, it says that if there's any added value treatment that the patient receives, that the insurance carrier will likely cover an alternative benefit or not cover anything at all, and the patient is going to be responsible for those fees out of pocket. So I hope your internet is fast enough to see this video. This is basically an illustration of an insurance crown. So that's a PFM, an insurance crown, if you will. And of course, when you smash it with a sledgehammer, naturally, that's the reaction, is that the only thing that's left is a piece of metal. Now, this is a zirconia crown. Although the zirconia is considered a form of composite, when you look at the full CDT definition, a zirconia crown doesn't fit the definition of a porcelain all-ceramic substrate crown. And here's why. A zirconia crown is strong. It's much, much stronger than traditional all-ceramic. And in fact, most chemists, and I would say all chemists that I've interviewed over 100 of them, said that the zirconia used in dentistry is considered a white metal. So it kind of falls in the category of a PFM, not necessarily an all-ceramic. But the ADA wants you to use the all-ceramic code to bill out a zirconia crown. Now, the other component is that you do have an opportunity to bill an extra fee for that. Now, this is the controversial area because many of you think, oh, that is just unethical. You can't do that. The reality is that this is Darwinism in dentistry, that many practices that are participating with insurance that take 50% of a discount when you seat a crown. I don't know how you survive when you do that. But in an effort for you to protect the financial integrity of the crown, you can at least offset your labs. You don't want to call it a lab fee, but essentially what we do is we call, like the zirconia, we code it as a 2740.Z. We call it a long-lasting material. EMAX, the aesthetics to that, we call it aesthetic material or lithium disilicate material. And then for a CEREC same-day crown, there are a lot of advantages to a CEREC same-day crown or an E4D same-day crown. You're milling it in-house and have a lot more control for those of you that use it. And you've invested over $100,000 in a piece of equipment that would give patients an added value experience in terms of not being reappointed and all of that, if you do believe in that, if you do have a CEREC. So these things do qualify as quote-unquote material fees. Some offices call them upgrades. I don't like to call it an upgrade, simply because it is an added value which is consistent with the insurance contracts between the patient's employer and the insurance carrier. The key with all of this, folks, is that if you do charge an additional fee, whether it be for crown, veneer, ortho, or anything else in the same category, is that you have to have a consent form. And this is where the HITECH Act comes in play. The patient signs a consent form that basically states that this is a non-covered additional service or added value service that they receive. Custom shading and staining, you shouldn't be paying for that. That's something that the patient should be paying for. And in an effort for them to have an election to pay for something above and beyond what their insurance covers. Now, keep in mind, insurance covers amalgams. Insurance covers PFM base metals for the most part. In fact, many insurance carriers are using a full cast base metal crown as their alternative benefit. So, there's a huge difference in quality dentistry versus policy dentistry, which is what insurance carriers are paying for. So this is a concept that I highly recommend many of you implement. It takes a while to implement this and more of a presentation and studying. So in terms of your options on what to do next with this information, just please don't do what this guy did and start burning your rival dental practices down that are near you. I wanted to open it up to Q&A. If any of you have any questions, just go to your chat function that you're chatting with me about on the audio side to send any questions. Also, check out our podcast, SayNoToPPOs.com. SayNoToPPOs.com is not, we're not saying get rid of all your PPO contracts, although that would be nice and ideal. This is a podcast dedicated to providing insurance education that is both good for the front office as well as for anybody that practices in the clinical side in the back office. Okay, so question came through. Can we do this upgrade to partials and dentures? Yes, absolutely. So essentially, with partials, the one thing that I want to mention about partials, if you're doing a partial that hooks to a crown and you have to modify that crown or that tooth for the partial to hook to, remember the code 2971. 2971 is often referred to as a survey crown, and it's covered by almost every insurance plan that I've seen out there. So, but aside from that, from the partials and the dentures, if you're doing something that's quote unquote above and beyond the standard product or the standard form of care, then yes, absolutely you can do this with partials and dentures. And that's the key thing that you need to ask. Are we providing the patient with a superior product above and beyond what insurance pays for? And the fee that you charge for the upgrade for a partial or denture, you just have to be able to make sure that you justify that fee in the form of giving the patient the added value discussion. So like that example between the PFM being smashed by the sledgehammer and the zirconia crown, that's basically what the patients need to see and hear is, how do we justify this fee? And if you give them that case presentation that justifies the fee, that's really all you need to do for compliance reasons. And then put together compliance reasons in terms of compliance with the added value concept, as well as compliance with informed consent to the patient. Okay, next question, implant superior product type and or brand. I like Nobel. I am a huge Nobel fan. In fact, the reason why I like Nobel, now Nobel, it's not, I mean, they're not cheap. I often refer to them as the Tiffany of implant products simply because you pay a premium, but you have far fewer failures. Nobel has the most education available, free education, especially on their website. So if you contact a Nobel representative and you ask them for the education, the online webinar education, they'll give that to you. The latest Nobel product that I've seen that I really like, it's called the angulated screw channel. And that basically, the driver is angulated, and it allows the doctors to easily seat a posterior crown, without the tough angles that you normally see. The other thing I like about the Nobel is that it does qualify as a full upgrade, simply because a lot of other implant products that are out there, there's a much higher failure rate among other implant vendors versus the Nobel products. And the Nobel products are truly a superior form of implant products that you can find that's out there. Maybe a little bit more expensive than the other, but I promise you that from what I've seen is that those that usually see implant failures on a product side, they see far fewer or even eliminate them through the Nobel products. Any other questions does anybody have? Okay, check out the let's see here. So can we charge a premium brand of implants? Yeah, you can. You can absolutely charge for a premium brand of implants. Again, this goes back to the fact that if you can justify that it's a premium product, the word premium automatically qualifies as an upgrade. Whether you're buying a first-class premium ticket on an airplane or buying premium gasoline, it does fit the criteria. So all you need to do is just justify the additional expense to the patient. And then make sure your consent forms are bulletproof. Okay, I'm going to continue to monitor the chat forum here if there are any other questions. Otherwise, here's my contact information. I believe Gillian recorded this webinar and will be available on the ePractice Manager site as well. But if you have any questions for me, send me an email or give me a phone call. Okay, next question here is, where can I find the video illustrating the different crowns? Send me an email and I'll send you a podcast link to a friend of mine. His name is Dr. Tarun Agrawal. And he basically illustrates the difference in terms of what he does as a doctor when it comes to different crowns. Now, I like to keep it a little simple. If it's an Emax crown, it's an upgrade. Doesn't matter what level in Emax. If it's a zirconia crown, it's an upgrade, no matter what level of zirconia you're using. If you're doing custom shading, glazing, staining, that all qualifies as an upgrade. If you're doing master ceramic work, cosmetic work, that all qualifies as an upgrade. So in order for you to qualify for an upgrade, you basically have to look at what insurance carriers pay for. And if what you're doing is better, it's an upgrade. Okay. All right, folks. Hey, well, it was great having you with me today. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this was very helpful. Send me an email or give us a call if you have any other questions. But thank you so much. Gillian, I'll pass things back to you. But thanks, everybody. Have a great day.